Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our joint SPA for SIRA and SME webinar. My name is Liz Jajal. I am part of the SPA committee and I head the Education, Training and Awareness Office. We have lined up a lot of very interesting webinars, workshops and courses for all of you in the coming months, so stay tuned. We are delighted to have this presentation today as we have two very versatile speakers who will talk to you about artificial intelligence. I can promise it's going to be a great learning experience. Our moderator for the day is Daniel Norman of Information Forum Security Limited UK. I would also like to take this opportunity to introduce our partners SME. Security Middle East magazine is the oldest and most widely read publication serving the security industry throughout the wider Middle East region. For over 20 years, they have published a bi-monthly magazine which is read by over 42,000 professionals. They are the official regional media partners of Intersect Dubai. SPA for SIRA is delighted to collaborate with such a well-respected platform for this webinar. We are excited to continue this partnership with content in every issue of their print magazine. Without taking up much more of your time, let me ask Daniel to take over. Thank you for your attention. Daniel?
Thank you, Liz, for the introductions there. And thank you to everyone joining this first panel session for this partnership. I'm very excited to introduce Aluisio Figueiredo, who is the CEO at Intelligent Security Systems, as well as Tannya Jajal, who is a futurist, AI expert and author at OR Academy and VMware. Both speakers have significant pedigree in the space of artificial intelligence, machine learning, and topics in that arena. To introduce Al, as CEO of Intelligent Security Systems, Al is responsible for the day-to-day operations of the organization, as well as overseeing the strategic development and execution of the company's corporate and product plans. He has been integral to the worldwide expansion of this organization, especially across North and South America, Europe, and the Middle East, and has a well-proven ability to motivate his staff, and at the same time combines a gift for entrepreneurial flair with a brass tax ability to manage the bottom line. Our second presenter, Tannya, is a technology author, AI expert and futurist. She is the UAE's chapter lead for the Global Women in Tech movement and author of the upcoming book, Thinking Machines, AI and the Intelligence Explosion. Through her work, Tannya encourages current and future leaders to explore the ethical and practical implications of exponential technologies on business, life, and society at large. So for everyone listening to the call now, artificial intelligence is a very forward-looking, important technology that all industries and regions should be considering. So without further ado, I would like to hand over to Aluisio to kick off his presentation on AI.
Thank you very much, Daniel. I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you, everybody that is attending. I will share my screen so we can kick this off. Can you guys see my screen? Are we good? Very good. So basically, as Daniel said, ISS has been working with artificial intelligence, deep learning, basically converting video into meaningful data for over 25 years. And as Daniel mentioned before, AI is a quite interesting topic and it's a wide range of application. So I would start today posing a question to you. Is AI the answer for every problem? Or it's just a useless a buzzword? And we keep seeing companies coming left and right, offering incredible algorithms, incredible promises. But is this really true? Throughout all these years, what we found out is that the answer is somewhere in the middle. There are tasks that are really designed for a classical image processing. We've been doing that since early 90s. For example, you see on the screen, recognizing letter and numbers, like a container, a sea freight container. There are structured data in there. So this is a typical task for a classical image analytics. On the other side of this screen, you see people playing sports. No structure in there. They could be playing a frisbee, football, volleyball. It's basically unlimited ways that you can recognize a person. That's a different task. That's a typical task of deep learning and then AI. We can recognize patterns. We can teach by example machines to learn that a person running after a ball is playing sports, for instance. And this can be very, very scalable, different than the classical image processing that is very structured data. So what's the applications on specifically on security that we see out there? You can start from an object recognition, a luggage left behind on an airport, or a box that fall off a truck on a highway. You can detect a car parked on the shoulders, an accident. You can go further and detect behavior. What we do, for example, on a factory, making sure the workers are at their positions at all times. That is nobody running across a sensitive area. You can go further. You can use for this technology for facial recognition, some types of vehicle license plate. We recently at ISS trained our network to detect cars, color, make, and model. It's a tremendous amount of data sets that you have to teach the software. But once you teach that a Mercedes has a particular symbol, or a Ford car has a particular symbol, then we can expand on this network. However, that comes with some perils as well. What my colleague Tannya is going to be talking in a little bit is the legal implications. Face recognition, for instance, we are seeing companies being banned from regions by using this technology to segregate part of the population, or license plate recognition. All this has to be carried out properly. There are regulations for that, the GDPR, encryption, who owns the data. All those areas must be carefully controlled in order to use the technology in the way that offers no harm. I do not want to take Tannya's module on this. We're going to talk more about the implications and ethics on the next presentation. As you can see here, the applications, they have no limits. We can keep adding and adding. And as the technology and the CPU power goes up, with the prices going down, we can keep adding more functionalities on this. Moving forward, this poses a different way to spec projects. Today, what we see, it's a lot of sophistication, plenty of options out there. So the classic approach that we see before AI is end user talks to an integrator, spec a project, look for vendors, check with the end user, integrator or consultant validates, goes to the vendor, and the approach is done and the project is installed. It was very part number driven with low level of sophistication. What we see on the market today, this approach might not work well when you are dealing with sophisticated technology. Basically, what we learn throughout the years is first we listen to the customer. We understand where the problem is. It's like first you understand what kind of taste he likes. Then you go back and pick the ingredients for the meal. So first end game, why the customer is looking for the system, what's the problem at hand. Then we go back and put a solution that's going to be tailor-made to that particular problem. And AI gives us the ability to scale the solution as we grow inside the particular scenario. What is very important for us, and we see as a big failure, when we do the traditional approach, what happens? We get our typical RFP compliance matrix. The solution must have a video management, it must have license plate, it must have object left behind, tracking algorithms. We have a number of features, but nobody put together how the solution is going to look. At the end of the day, you got a kind of a Frankenstein. You have a body, you have an arm from one company, another arm from another, and you expect that this should work like a Swiss clock, and it doesn't. For the system integrators out there in the call, I would like to ask a question. How many times you have to go back to a job and readjust and redo the integration and install a new version, and then the integration doesn't work? So for me, one of the key metrics for this is get a unified platform. Work with companies that have chemistry together, that they work together and they really support it. So being a modular architecture, you can ingest more data. Interoperability, it's got to be an open platform. You have to be able to trust on your partner, and at the same time has one company that is the lead of that. AI is very sophisticated. There is a number of ways to do one task, and you need to get the most efficient way. Provide at the end a dashboard with business intelligence to your customer. At the end of the day, what we are providing, we are not providing really a video system. We are providing data so they can measure, they can increase efficiency, they can decrease costs, and using those cameras to do much more than watch a scene and then play back once you have an event. The idea here should be proactive, help our customers to run their business in a linear way. And this encompasses a variety of algorithms, systems, integrations, work with SAP, work with ERPs. It's a whole ecosystem that must work extremely aligned. How we do that? Basically, instead of picking out of the shelf solutions, again, the idea of having a compliance matrix or branch of checkbox, we work vertically. We drive deep into markets and therefore understand their needs. Instead of going a mile wide and an inch deep, I like to go an inch wide and a mile deep. If you're talking with city surveillance, smart city customers, what's the end game? How you can make the city a better place for living so you can attract more talents. If you're talking on a ITS, Intelligent Transportation System, how can we make maintenance teams to work more efficiently? Meaning, if you detect an accident, how far you can dispatch a police or a tow truck? Time is extremely important on those. If you can address quickly an accident, you avoid having secondary accidents. Somebody breaks the light, and then the first one hits, a couple of minutes, another one, and that costs money. It stops the whole highway for a while, and it's pretty much a chain reaction. The systems must be vertically oriented to address specific needs of the customers. The steps that we see this being used, especially on the AI deployment, is what we call the lean canvas value proposition. What that means, we actually take into consideration first the gains, the customer's wishes, what are the roadblocks that's going to take us in there, how much budget we have, design the solution with the end game in mind, not selling part numbers, but making sure that what we are designing here is going to fulfill the needs of the end customer and the stakeholders involved. I will illustrate this with a real product example. We had an instance that one particular government asked us to provide solutions for pedestrian safety. So we started by understanding the problems. What's the problems? At night, pedestrians, especially now with the great cell phones and WhatsApp, we call them the cell phone zombies. They are walking on the street, looking at their cell phone, crossing streets, going everywhere without looking. So cities are having an increased amount of pedestrians being hit by cars. Not only pedestrians look at cell phones, we see all over the world, it's not particular to the Middle East or anywhere else, drivers answering texting and looking at their WhatsApp videos or Facebook or social media in general, and they're not really paying attention. So we took all those constraints on one side. We look at existing solutions. We can put lights on the street, we can put roadblocks. That takes the attention at the drivers, and it's not really a solution that is yielding results. We decided to take a different approach and use AI. So we took the pains, we took the gains, the roadblocks, and what technology is available. And at the end of the day, we combined cameras, we combined AI detecting and classifying objects. We did an active illuminator for that. So we put hardware, we put software, and we designed the product directly to a POC. This is the final product, exactly what the customer was looking for, and I will show this in action. So this solution combines a camera for vision, illuminator as a spotlight to show drivers and detect pedestrians, and then the controller analytics. So basically, that is to illustrate an approach that is very different than the traditional model. What we see, as I mentioned before, we see that they buy a shell of a car, that they put the engine from one manufacturer, the gearbox from another, the air conditioning from a third one, and the doors from a fourth one. And then they take all this, they take this piece of equipment and throw on a Formula One racetrack and expect it's going to perform perfectly. We take a completely different approach. We assemble these solutions carefully, making sure that we can support, and all those pieces work in tandem. Hardware, video management, AI algorithms. The end result is a system installed, and this video here shows you already this product installed. That's a specific AI product to prevent pedestrian fatalities. That's the technology working to save lives. And we have a variety of cases where we apply technology to do such levels. And then these cameras are going to be sent to the command and control. We do license plate recognition if a car does not stop. And that's the modularity I mentioned before. This is the beginning. How can we now start making sure drivers are getting penalized if they do not give the way to pedestrian? How about if they're crossing a red light? All those add-ons are available to the system as the solution grows inside the company. And with that, I will leave our contact information. Any questions, concerns, I'm here. I love questions. Again, our Middle East team, I am in Dubai this week, so I'm happy to be here. I was just telling before in the debrief, I love to be in the region. I think the potential here is unbelievable. I'm glad to say that we have a great team to support, and they're all based here in the GCC region. I will turn back to you, Daniel.
Thank you, Al, for that presentation. Really insightful look at some of the products you've got there. And in terms of, neural networks, machine learning, and that application to real life, I think is something that a lot of our listeners will be interested in. I think, as you said on that first slide, AI can kind of be seen as this big word that people look at and they think it means everything. But breaking it down into machine learning, neural networks, and things like that, it does really add that texture and context to what it is and the real life applications.
Yeah, and Daniel, to continue this discussion, what we see out there, those cases, they require a tremendous amount of data sets. And like I said, the company is in 25 years. We never thought that we were going to use all the library of videos we collected throughout these years. And today we see the more you train, the more you add information, the more accurate is your result. And it takes time. An AI system is not something that's going to happen like black magic. You need to work on a structured way, as you know, understand really the problem that we are solving, understand what type of framework we're going to use. I did not talk about frameworks, but there is a variety of them: Café2, TensorFlow. Depending on the applications, you're going to use a learning environment. And you've got to be a specialist to be able to pick the one that is going to be more beneficial on an efficient way.
Absolutely. Just to echo that, I think Tesla's self-driving cars had to do something like 100,000 hours of training to learn what right and wrong was, what camera signs meant, what different road signs meant, and things like that. So yeah, the learning element of that is pivotal.
And that's a great example. And they're still learning, by the way. You still hear accidents here and there. I mean, it's common, and people have to adapt to that too. I'll give an example on Tesla. I have a friend in the US that has one. He was in the supermarket. He actually asked the car to come pick him up. Somebody was backing up at the same time. Since she saw there was nobody driving, she thought the car was stopped, and they both back up at the same time, and it has a little hit. Again, you have to train. They did not cover everything. It's still a lot to go.
Exactly. And just to echo your sentiment there, if anyone has any questions, please do add them to the Q&A box. And at the end of the second presentation, we can take them in a bit more detail. But without further ado, I would like to pass over to Tannya, who's going to take us through her presentation.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Daniel. Thank you, Aluisio. That was very, very insightful and a great segue into what I'm going to talk about. So I'm going to take a slightly different approach to our topic today, which is we're going to talk about AI ethics. So let's try to think about this holistically. I'm really pleased, Daniel and Aluisio, that you spoke about really pinning down where in the evolution of the technology we are. No doubt there's a lot of buzz around the word AI, and so we really need to get granular and almost careful and thorough when we talk about AI, right? Directly linked to that are the ethics, policies, and frameworks that surround artificial intelligence. Of course, it's groundbreaking technology because artificial intelligence is quite literally the replication of our own intelligence. But because of this, we need to consider what AI ethics really are and the role that they play. And my view is that the reason that it's so important to consider AI ethics is that we live in this world of accelerating change, right? We've seen this technology deployed across so many different areas in so many different ways that sometimes it's important to bear in mind that the legal frameworks of the past are no longer relevant to the present. So we need to create ethical bodies that protect and monitor the interests of individuals, of companies, as well as of governments. And we now need to start thinking about who's responsible for the deployment of AI, of these technologies in our daily lives, and who's accountable, for instance, when we're talking about autonomous vehicles, and in the instance that there is an accident, who's the accountable person, right? Or who's the accountable entity? So one way that I like to think about it, and when I've explored this topic in the past or spoken to young minds about it, is I suggest that they ask some key questions around the ethics of AI, right? One, is the technology fair? Who's responsible for it? From a security perspective, how do we protect access to AI from bad actors? And what does AI mean for the future of work, right? What does it mean for the jobs in the future, and for not just this generation, but also for future generations? So from a security perspective, I would say that some areas to really focus on is the safety, validity, and robustness of AI systems. We need to make sure that any technology that we use is deployed and leveraged safely, right? We want to be able to rely on these systems. Data collection and privacy, which is very, very relevant, especially to this current era, but the reality is that it's always been relevant. Algorithm and programmer bias. Aluisio, thank you for touching upon this earlier. You spoke about briefly about discrimination, about how some of the biases that us humans have can carry into the technologies that we use, which is very relevant in the security sector. Job displacement, and of course, the big area around cybersecurity, right? I want to start on the note of saying that technology itself is a double-edged sword, right? We have a lot more control over building it and deploying it than we think that we do. So though the headlines may sound scary sometimes, it's important to keep things in context. It's important to keep perspective. And it's nice to remember that the fire that kept our houses warm also burnt our houses down. So how we leverage technology is entirely up to us. So let me come to the first point. Now, human history is really littered with examples of trial and error, right? This is why we innovate. We identify problems and we seek solutions for them. And in the process, sometimes we may be wrong. Now, so far, the benefits that technological progress has brought us have outweighed the cost. Imagine the number of lives saved because we now have machines doing factory work instead of the fragility of human beings, right? Consider the number of lives we've managed to save, like through the sort of technology that ISS is building, the camera detection tool, because we have a faster response rate or we have more alert systems in place, right? In the future, when our roads are filled primarily with self-driving vehicles, we will be thankful for the fact that motor accidents rarely, if at all, happen. And I actually think that road accidents will be rarer. If not rarer, they'll be as rare as aviation ones. Some examples in the past or in recent history even are, of course, in 1990, AT&T had an issue where all 114 AT&T centers crashed when a single switch malfunctioned because of a single line of faulty code that was implemented in a complex software upgrade. In 2017, or I think it was 2018, a rogue robot killed an unassuming factory worker. And in 2018, a self-driving Uber car hit and killed a pedestrian. All of these are cause for concern, sure, but what they go to show is that what we need are ethical policies and bodies and legal frameworks around building these technologies. And we need to make sure that the folks who are building the technologies are people that we trust, are companies that we can rely on, and are companies that are transparent enough for us to know what exactly they're doing, right? So until we reach that stage where intelligent AI will build robust, intelligent AI of its own, we have to put these systems in place. And from a security perspective, this means implementing a system of checks and balances for testing machines before we even use them. And my approach is always use the scientific method of inquiry, right? When you have a product or when you have a solution or a hypothesis, take it, test it, validate, and validate. And we also need to incorporate government regulations on companies that are building products to hold them accountable for building safe products that are deployed. From a data collection and privacy perspective, this is quite fascinating because we have to wonder if privacy will survive the future, right? Privacy and data collection issues already pervade us today. We don't have to imagine a future in which we feel squirmish when the government or when private companies collect our data. This is already in some ways happening. But there's no doubt that we live today both digital and virtual lives. With the onset of the pandemic, this has become even more relevant, because even if physical interactions are the preference, it's impossible to not survive in today's age without a virtual presence. Moreover, it's because with the rise of the Internet of Things, we know that sensors, data, cameras are everywhere. And in many ways, this helps us, right? We're able to build a more secure society. We're able to build a society that's evidence-based. So in the justice system, we no longer have to depend on hearsay or on what people say, but we can actually depend on technologies like the ones that security companies are building to help us see what really happened and to help us reach conclusions that can keep people safer in the future. Now, data collection, though, can impact us, I always say, in two ways. On the one hand, because companies are able to collect our data and because our data is everywhere, there's the threat of cyber criminals who have the ability to steal our personal data. I personally have had credit card theft a couple of times happen, right? And apparently this is a very, very common issue. Semantic says that cyber criminals can earn up to 2.2 million per credit card per website through form jacking attacks. But the second way, of course, that data collection, that data collection and privacy are relevant refers to how our data is used by the companies that collect them. Today, the reason that AI is continuing to improve, whether slowly or fastly, is because it's exposed to larger and larger data sets. So the more data that a system is exposed to, the better it can become. And that's in some ways the boon and the bane of living in the current era, which is that the more data we create, the better our AI systems will become, which means that the more secure our society could be in the future. But it also means at the individual level, there's something that you compromise, right? So from a security perspective, though, something that Aluisio and I were talking about recently when we met is that we've always kept tabs on people, right? As a society, we've always collected data from people. In the past, people used to tag in and out of work. Today, we collect data through things like facial recognition, through object recognition, threat monitoring, encryption. So all of us enter passwords, use our face for unlocking our iPhones. Authentication, of course, which is very critical and very useful. And of course, something as basic as putting our data in the cloud or having information about us on social media platforms, right? So though there's a bit of fear around this, it's important to keep in mind that it's natural. It's a natural evolution of society that we keep tabs on where people are, what they're doing, and how they're surviving, right? What's changed, however, today is how often we collect data. So the democratization of new devices and products is a good thing. It means that we can proliferate them across industries, but it also means that at the individual level, it can make someone quite uncomfortable, right? And really, what I say is we need to think about data privacy, right? So we need to put more and more of an effort or emphasis on the regulations or the policies that governs the use of an individual's data when shared with any entity. So we can't avoid the fact that our data will be collected. This is inevitable and it'll take place in many shapes and forms, and no doubt it'll help us. But what we can control are the regulations, the transparencies, the laws around data privacy. And for those of you who hadn't heard about the famous Cambridge Analytica case, I would highly recommend doing a brief Google search and looking it up. Facebook allowed an independent organization to extract vast amounts of private information about people from the Facebook database, and that entity passed the data along to someone else who used it for political means in the US elections, right? So what happened with Cambridge Analytica was not a matter of Facebook systems being infiltrated by a third party. That wasn't the issue, but it was a matter of Facebook systems working in some ways as they were designed to work, right? Data was amassed, it was extracted, and it was exploited. So to address this issue, though, what we need is transparency. We need honest and open debate. We need more awareness, and we need a reevaluation of our existing systems as well as robust policymaking. And to algorithm and program bias. Now, that's a third and very relevant point as well. It's no secret that human actors are susceptible to a whole wide variety of biases. We have cognitive biases like the confirmation bias that affects our ability to reach sound conclusions. We can be implicitly have racial and societal biases that have a direct impact on other people. And if we want to deploy AI in functions like HR, for hiring, in the justice system, or in security for facial recognition or object recognition when a crime has been committed, then we want to expect that the AI acts in a fair, just, and more well-rounded way than a human would, right? Because we want that AI is able to account for our misfortunes or the lack of our ability to be objective. So if we want to evolve to that point, it's absolutely essential that we try to battle algorithm and program bias. Today, programs are still built by human actors, so no doubt some of those biases carry on into artificial intelligence. So one example that Aluisio brought to my mind was of a well-known case in recent history of the Chinese company Hikvision that was implicated, right? Hikvision is a Chinese camera manufacturer that was implicated in a human rights abuse case against the Uyghur Muslim minority in China. So for companies like this, for private entities will need to learn how to take a stance. They'll need to learn how to have accountability and probably have to hire for roles like technology ethicism or technology advocacy that'll actually allow them to take a government stance in the public space, right? Because again, accountability becomes very, very, very significant in this context. One other fascinating example of AI bias is COMPAS. COMPAS is known as stands for the Correctional Offender Management Profiling for Alternative Sanctions, I believe. And COMPAS was designed to assess in the justice system a defendant's risk of committing a crime in the future. It's a concept known as recidivism. And COMPAS's algorithm uses a lot of factors, right, to generate a risk score, whether or not a criminal offender will commit a crime in the future, and then provides a risk score to the relevant stakeholders. But in a 2016 study conducted by ProPublica, which is a nonprofit news organization, it was demonstrated that COMPAS exhibited a noticeable bias against a particular sort of defendant from a particular ethnic background. So it'll be very important for us to, again, keep testing these systems if we want to make sure that they're fighting against the very biases that we are often guilty of. And then, to a topic that's personally very close to my heart, AI and the future of work. We do wonder, and it's important to wonder what jobs in the security industry specifically would be displaced in the future by automation. Now, again, the headlines can be quite scary, but it's important to bear in mind that automation in the past, at least, has often created a lot more jobs than killed jobs, right? Though some jobs will be displaced and automated, other jobs would actually, more jobs will be created, jobs that require higher order thinking, that require creativity, that can actually be more interesting. And, to the point that Aluisio was bringing up earlier, there's a modern approach of dealing with and deploying and creating these technologies. And often that more modern vertical thinking approach can help your organization transform in a more disruptive, exciting, and future-ready way. So from a security perspective, some examples of jobs that could change, right? So maybe a job of a traditional security engineer might be disrupted in the future, but you create room for jobs like security architect or a cloud security architect or a governance and compliance officer, or even something like a security analyst. And I'm going to wrap up on a final note on cybersecurity, also to the point that I was making earlier. The rise of AI and machine learning is altering the landscape of risks for citizens, for organizations, and for states. Just the ability to recognize a face and to navigate through space with the help of computer vision techniques. You can create an autonomous weapon system with something like that, right? You can impersonate people online, you can sway public opinion, you can affect the result of elections. But artificial intelligence, even in cybersecurity, is a double-edged sword, right? And what I mean by that is that the technology itself is neither good nor bad. It's how we leverage it that matters. So here's a very brief illustration of what that looks like, right? AI security threats could come in the form of espionage, which in terms of cybersecurity, it means gleaning insights about a system, utilizing that information. Let's say if somebody takes information from a system and utilizes it for his or her own profit. So essentially a hacker could use a machine learning based engine to drill down and learn more about internals from a data set. Then there's sabotage, where someone could disable the functionality of an AI system by flooding the AI with requests, right? So you can deliberately affect the system. There's fraud, which means in AI, it means misclassifying tasks, introducing incorrect data in the training set, which is known as data poisoning, or interacting with the system at large, right? But at the same time, we know that we can also leverage AI to improve the way that our systems work. We can work with anomaly detection. We can use AIs for misuse detection, for threat monitoring, for data exploration, for risk assessment. So AI offers multiple opportunities, sure, for certain segments of the populations, for hackers, for instance, but at the same time, artificial intelligence and security were in many ways made for each other. Modern machine learning techniques seem to be arriving just in time to fill the gaps of previously rule-based data security systems. And in their essence, they try to fulfill several tasks that allow improving security systems and preventing attacks. So really, what it comes down to is that AI ethics comes down to security. When we think about how the technology is developing over time, when we think about how with the rise of the Internet of Things, there are more and more products and solutions deployed that directly impact us at an individual level. Some key questions that we need to address are, how is user information encrypted? How can you use machine learning to detect anomalies for future protection, to save lives, right? Like what Aluisio was talking about earlier. How are organizations leveraging hardware security? And finally, whose hands is your data in, right? Who are the companies that you're trusting your data with? It may feel like at the individual level, we don't have much power over this, but we absolutely do, because we create the trends that government entities, that private entities, and the public sector follow to a degree. So that's it from my end. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop them. I'm going to stop sharing and hand it over back to Daniel.
Thank you, Tannya. That was
an impressive presentation there. A lot of different subtopics that I think we're going to have to unpackage with some questions now. And yeah, as Tannya said, if anyone on the line has any additional questions, just pop them in the question bar and we can chat through them now. I would like to invite Al back to turn his camera on, and we can have a bit of a discussion around some of the topics that you've discussed today. And I'd like to start really by looking forward, if you don't mind. And my first question is to Tannya, and it is, where are we going with AI? Where are these technologies going to evolve over the next 10 or 20 years or so? And are we genuinely close to human level intelligence yet, or is it still this machine learning level? What are your thoughts at this stage?
Yeah, my thoughts on that are, well, first of all, I think it's okay to say that we actually don't know as a society, right? A lot of, even the experts of the experts in the AI space disagree about where we are in the evolution of the technology. And it's okay to have that. When it comes to analyzing how close we are to human level general intelligence, though we don't have the exact solution for where it'll be 10, 20, 30 years from now, what we can think about is what aspects of intelligence is artificial intelligence replicating, right? So there are various aspects of human intelligence. There's reasoning, there's logical reasoning, there's abstract thinking, which would be much more difficult to automate, creative thinking, which would be much more difficult to automate. And having that perspective helps us see what these different technologies are really, where they're getting to. My personal view is that yes, eventually we will reach human level general intelligence, but this will not be the sole effort of human programmers. It'll probably be the combined efforts of existing AI systems that do really well with large amounts of data, right? Which is something that us humans can't do. And it'll be the combination of that and our own creativity that creates essentially, in some ways, cyborgs of the future, right? So it's not going to be as disastrous as people think, which is this robocalypse. I think that's absolutely unrealistic and doesn't put things in perspective. What it will be, it'll be a more combined and careful effort of the proliferation of technology to save lives, essentially, and make the world a better place.
Excellent, excellent. I think some of the research we did at the Information Security Forum normally looks at the bad side of it, so the key risks, the threats, and some of the examples of attackers spoofing image recognition in cars and deep fakes being used to extort money from organizations and things like that. So Al, my question to you is, what kinds of risks do you see AI posing to individuals and organizations, and how do you recommend we manage them?
Daniel, for me, it's again, every technology comes with responsibility. Tannya, I think, illustrated quite a bit the good, the bad, and the ugly around. She gave a great example on facial recognition. Today, what I see specifically on the physical market, Daniel, we use for example, the same face recognition that Tannya mentioned, same technology on the same provider, but we do that in New York City for even here in Dubai Chamber of Commerce is a good example. How to use facial recognition to give access to the building. Instead of you touching or looking for your card, use your face as a credential. It's an opt-in system. So you go there, you take your picture, you send to the building management, and they add your picture into the system. From that point on, your face is your credential. No, there is no deep fakes, there is no spoofing, there is nothing. You just come with your cup of coffee, talking on the phone, you have access to the building. The building recognizes your face, has a destination dispatch, knows what floor you're going to be in the building. We are doing that throughout New York City and beyond. And this was before COVID, believe it or not. We have other technologies to do a perimeter detection on critical infrastructure, where we have people coming in and poison water supplies, or even cases here in the Middle East with bombing into Saudi Aramco refineries. We can use AI to really detect that. We can go beyond security, Daniel. As you know, detecting early stages of cancer in patients using image analytics is another part of AI that could be really beneficial to the general population. Again, at the end of the day, we are trying to help those companies run efficiently. We're not trying to replace people by machines. That's a myth, honestly speaking. All the AIs are helping the humans to perform better. It doesn't that you add an AI and you fire the person at the security booth or the doctor that looks at the images. AI is just pinpointing the areas of interest that a human can go there and look. Tesla is a great example you mentioned before. I don't know anybody that just sleep on the wheels. Yeah, the car can help you, but you still have your hands on the wheel and your foot on the brakes, because if something happens, you still require a human intervention. And I think that's pretty much what AI is today. And I don't see it changing drastically in the near future to replace humans.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I think as another example, IBM's Watson is being leveraged by doctors right now to identify cancer in patients far earlier than they would have otherwise with other technology. So yeah, I do definitely agree that it's AI, different types of machine learning, neural networks are there to supercharge human existence.
Daniel, I'll give you an example. We have a product that looks at undercarriage of cars, the under vehicle surveillance system. We have AI. We do the license plate, we do the facial recognition through the windshield, but the cream of the crop is pointing to the operator where the changes on the underbody is, the carrier. So if there is a bomb, a magnet or something, the operator is going to be alerted. And then he's going to look and say, oh, yeah, there is an object in there. Go for second inspections, flag that car. We are not replacing the human, but we are helping to do a better job. And I think that's how we treat AI, as a force multiplier.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's quite a nice segue into my next question. I'd like to pose it to Tannya, really. And we're saying that AI can supercharge humans and things like that. But how can traditional security products and companies avoid being disrupted by AI? If it's, are we going to get to a point where it's AI versus AI because the humans simply can't keep pace? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I love that question. You know, I like what Aluisio actually said during his presentation about this. One, I think the best way, and I think the companies that really have that edge, the competitive edge in that space, are companies that know what it's like to work traditionally with the traditional products and systems, and then have an innovative approach or important like futuristic exponential mindset, right? Where they can actually see or make some sort of predictions about what the future of the technology could look like, and then create their company strategy based on that. So disruption is, people think that, you know, the next big company is going to come and disrupt any traditional company. And sure, there have been some instances of that happening. When you look at the core issue of that, let's take a great example is when Kodak got disrupted by Instagram, right? When you look at the core issue of why that's happened, it's happened because of a misalignment in company strategy. It's not because of the actual technology itself. Many people within these large organizations actually recognize the technologies that they could use in their companies. It's just a lack of being able to deploy it because of whatever bureaucratic measure. So I actually think it's we have much more control over it than we think we do. What's important here, though, is to change our mindsets a little bit. It's no longer enough to just think linearly, right? Meaning that we're not just going from step 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5. Today, if you take 6 steps forward, you're doubling at the exponential level. And that's why they call them exponential technologies. That doesn't mean that it's out of our control. It just means that the pace and trajectory is a little bit different than it used to be before.
Yeah, excellent.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's a
Yeah,
great
do you
point.
have any thoughts there, Al? Any
Yeah, I think that what Tannya said is very rich, actually, in several levels. First, the experience. What disruption, as it happens, you know, the next generation of a technology here and there, but really the experience matters the most. Access to channels, what your customers, I think, what's the real problems? I think the innovation, every innovation has to have a purpose behind. Yes, you can do license plate recognition better with AI. And I love the Middle East, by the way, because the Middle East is a place that really pushes to the edge. AI is not enough, license plate is not enough. Now I need, like I mentioned before, color, make, and model. That request came from here, from SIRA, as a matter of fact. I was talking to one of the heads of SIRA, and then he came to me 2 years ago and said, that's what we are looking. They are looking predictively. Why? Because they know sometimes something happens and you do not have the license plate, but you know that is a white Ford Mustang. All right, so let's look at that. Let's force multiply again instead of looking at footage. Just get a report of those. I think that's the purpose of the innovation. AI comes handy, and Tannya said easy to scale. Is exponentially scalable. We are working on the next generation, and that helps us to be predictive. That's quite important. Some parts of the world, what we do, we teach the machine to follow patterns. Sometimes you see a white Mustang coming to the center of city, and then a car is being stolen every time. So let's try to predict that. Next time this car comes, most likely a crime is going to be committed. Let's help the law enforcement to be ready for when it happens next time. It's this type of events and reactions that we try to work along with our customers and end users to achieve.
Yeah, definitely. I'm gonna challenge that, I think, because the way you kind of put that, it sounds quite dystopian to me. It sounds like the movies you see where there's pre-crime and people are making predictive assumptions.
Quite dangerous to say. It's a dangerous subject, by the way. Yeah.
But my question there, it goes back to Tanya's presentation a little bit around the regulatory element here and the privacy element. Do you think there'll be maybe a backlash from consumers or the regulators, because there's going to be IoT systems, cameras, sensors gathering information on individuals, sharing that data amongst different organizations? Are we going too far, or do you think the regulator will step in?
Will the I mean, I think regulators have to step in, right? The question is, how are they going to step in and what are they going to do about it? The key, in my opinion, is to just have a little bit of transparency around it. I think Aluisio and I were having this conversation a few days ago. We've always collected data from people, right? It's just that now that's changing and we don't realize that it's actually serving us in some pretty phenomenal ways. As a consumer, personally, I can feel a bit squirmish myself about my data being used against my will, especially for things like advertising, targeted advertising, for example, right? That's one example that makes me a little bit uncomfortable. But then if you zoom out and take a big picture perspective and see all of the amazing ways in which the world is benefiting from having this like Internet of Things era, right, which is slowly building up. I actually think we're on a we essentially, I think we live in one of the best times in human history. So again, what matters is regulators have to step in. We need to be aware of it. We need to also equip future generations. So we need to start talking to younger people, teaching in schools about what AI ethics are or what legal frameworks are. It's going to look different. There needs to be a focus on it. There needs to be intervention, but the intervention shouldn't be to stop it, in my view, because I think that can be quite a bane on innovation, the innovative process. The intervention should be for protection. It's like so many companies now have data privacy acts, right? And these will evolve over time. So it's, yeah, I would say that absolutely regulators step in, but it's not something that we necessarily should be afraid of or wary of, because stepping in could be a good thing. It could just mean having that system of checks and balances in place.
Yeah.
Any additional thoughts there, Al?
My experience is, I mean, it's really hands-on. I can go back to this opportunity in the US that we did the facial as a credential. We are actually scrutinized. We are talking about Fortune 50 companies around the globe. And privacy is a concern. Where is my data hosted? Is it encrypted? Is it encrypted at rest? Is it encrypted while it travels? All those checkboxes must be marked. We do not control data as a company. We give you the algorithm, the solution, but the data is hosted by the end customer. And that's where it lies, the issues. This data must be protected. Sometimes they're not even there, but it's no different than give you an access card. The only difference is now your face is a card, but that's it. Your data was already there on the access control in this particular case, or your license plate. You have your license plate is public. Anybody can go take a picture of your car. It's out and about. How are you going to protect and use it once you have massive amounts of data? Because now it's massive. It's not only somebody taking a picture of you in a mall. You are constantly being monitored. You land in an airport, cameras everywhere. You get into a taxi, camera on a taxi. You get to your hotel, cameras on the hotel. This is not only in the Middle East. This is global. It's everywhere. So what they're doing with your data, and that's the main concern. And one point, it's not only the regulators. In this particular project I mentioned, it's a private company. They were the ones to scrutinize the technology before offering to their tenants, which are Google, GM, Ford, all these big companies. They have standards and they need to be followed. We need to comply, not only say, oh, I'm a new disruptive technology out of a Silicon Valley somewhere, and here it is what I do. There is a lot of work behind. Tannya was very right. Experience matters in this market a lot. Scars on your body means something, and we need to have a future show before getting into that and offering technology like that. You have responsibilities, and they need to be matched properly.
Yeah, definitely. You mentioned data there and data storage. There was a question that's come in from the audience around as technology develops, the need for mega data storage is going to increase. Where do you see it going in terms of data storage and protecting the systems that store that data? Have we got enough kind of hypervisors and cloud storage there? Are we going to outuse that? What are your thoughts?
On my opinion, I think there are very good systems out there, either locally hosted or cloud-based. I do not see an impediment on the technology of storage. And again, what you are storing today, although there is large amount of data, what we try to do with AI is actually to reduce the amount of data by converting video, which is very data heavy, into metadata, which is pretty much nothing, right? So you keep video when it's needed. Otherwise, you discard. If there is no car passing on the road, you don't need to keep recording nothing. So AI is going to help you to actually prune it and make sure that you have only the data you need, and the metadata is where you're going to use your intelligence. So today, I do not see an issue on storage. New technologies coming up. There are plenty of companies with innovative storage. I mean, we work with a few of them, including Dell, has variety of ways to store, to secure them. Need to be a reputable company. For me, look at the history of the company. Look what they do. Any issues, like Tannya mentioned a few, with data leakage, very sensitive information. My recommendation, we do not deal with storage, look at the company before, see what the history is, and then pick your battles.
Yeah. Okay. I'm conscious of time now, but I think some of the presentations, or both presentations, have been absolutely fantastic and eye-opening. I'd like to go to both of you now, though, for maybe a closing statement. So what you see for the future and any kind of closing remarks you'd like to leave the audience with. So I'll go to Tannya first. What are your
ladies first? Yeah, as I was gonna say, ladies first.
Yeah, I think for me, generally speaking, the what I would say is, it's something that I said during the presentation itself, is we have a lot of reason to be optimistic. I know that it can seem like a scary or uncertain landscape, but there is reason to be optimistic, so long as we have the right bodies and the right mindsets around the implementation of technologies like AI. So technology is, in fact, a double-edged sword, and how we leverage it is up to us. That doesn't mean that we ignore the risks. It just means that we're more aware of them and that we're more conscious of how we deal with them.
Thank you. And Al, any closing comments?
Absolutely. First of all, very honored to be part of the seminar, especially here in a region that I really love to be. I see AI in my particular case is hands-on. And first of all, I see the results on the street. In my particular experience with license plate recognition here in the Middle East, mainly, where we use heavily AI to segregate different regions and even within the Emirates. I see here how the region is pushing us as technology provider to the next level. And the next one, they're already thinking about that. So first of all, thank you for the opportunity. Let's continue this conversation. AI is closer than you think. We are using AI every day in our lives today. It's no questions about that. And as far as the future, I hope that SIRA, SPA, all these organizations keep feeding us with challenges. That's what we need today. We need to keep being pushed to innovate, and that's how I'm going to end. Let's continue this journey. I'm honored to be here and hope for many more.
Thank you, Al, for your presentation and closing remarks, and thank you, Tannya, for your presentation as well and closing remarks too. I'd like to pass over to Adil Abdel-Hadi to close the presentations today.
Well, it was a very interesting presentation by our two experts, Al and Tannya, and definitely we learn a new thing every day on AI. But thank you very much indeed on behalf of the SPA for your presentations and the valuable information you provided to our members, and hopefully we can expand on that, because we believe AI is the future. So definitely we will continue, and congratulations for SME for this strategic partnership, which I think is going to be a win-win situation for both parties, and we will hope to continue cooperation with all. Thank you very much indeed for participating, and thank you to our speakers. And last but not least, I'm not going to forget Daniel for an amazing moderating of this event. Thank you very much indeed, and enjoy the rest of the day.